get started.
I wasn't able to get the live feed going. I think my Wi-Fi is
Well,
weak
let's.
here.
Thank you, Ram. Let's wait for Chris to come in, and he's gonna probably take care of that. But I'm just gonna get started because it's already 10 o'clock. And well, thank you guys for joining us today. I don't know if we had posted what we're doing or what we're talking about, but it's gonna be about ambient recording and guns and tanks and race cars and exciting stuff that some of us have been able to do. But our guests are better equipped to talk about that. I'm going to briefly mention who our guests are today. We have Paul Mauritius, who is best known most recently for the TV series SWAT. And from what I understand, there's a lot of really interesting vehicle and machine recordings. We have Gene Martin, who is a well-known commercial mixer here in LA. I should say Paul is in Utah right now, but he works in LA. And Gene Martin, commercial sound mixer, who's doing some really interesting man on the street series of commercials for Chevy. Is that still going on, Gene?
Well, hopefully they'll pick back up. But yeah, we've been doing those for 5 years now.
Awesome. That's a really interesting gig. So, well, that's it. We're trying to get Watson Wu, who is has done a lot of game show, or I'm sorry, not game show, video game recordings for mostly for vehicles, cars, motorcycles, and stuff. I hope he can join us. I think he's working today, but he's gonna try and find some time to join us. And then James Nolan may or may not show up. He does a lot of EPK recordings for video games and car commercials and such. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this line of work.
Were you talking to me? I'm sorry.
Actually, you broke up, Blas, so we don't know who it is that you wanted to start speaking.
Thank you. I was talking about Paul Mauritius.
Right. I got started in sound through music, and that took me to Nature Sound Recordings. I worked for several years with Bernie Krause out of San Francisco. Lived there for about 3 years, early 90s, and then gravitated towards TV and film from there.
And your interest in ambient recording, does that happen because of where you grew up, or was there a project that, excuse me, that started that?
Well, sound's always been part of my life. From an early age, my father directed a big band. And so some of my earliest memories are when I was laying in bed and feeling the vibration through the bed from my father downstairs playing in his band. And it's always been an interest to me. And so getting into music myself just perpetuated that. And once the club closed down and I was free to do things, I was lucky enough to move to San Francisco and get involved with Bernie Krause and spend some time in the wild. And that gave me a real perspective of the depth of sound. It's not just coming from one source or from one point. It basically is around you. And starting with MS series recordings and then moving to binaural recordings with the Sennheiser head in the beginning there was a lot of fun. And that stayed with me to TV and film. Although TV and film is primarily dialogue oriented, I'm Captain Overkill. I like to plant mics wherever there's a sound. For me, it's listening to my dailies that excites me. So if my mix is really good and it sounds like it's already been through post, I'm a camper.
So early on, you fell in love with listening, right?
I did. I fell in love with listening from when before I practically could walk.
Guys, I'm having some problems with my connection. I'm going to ask Ram to take over. I'm going to walk away for a second to see if I can fix my issues here. I apologize. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I did have a question for you, Paul, before I walk away. Tell us a little more about your ambient recordings. Because I understand you've been doing a lot of ambient recordings, nature and stuff. Am I right or not?
Oh, correct. Primarily with Bernie Krause, but as an independent, if I hear something, I lived in Portland for a number of summers. And we had a pool in the back that would be inundated with tadpoles in the spring, and frogs would just light up the hillside. And it was fun to place microphones around just to record that sound. So whenever I'm out in the wild and I have my kit with me, I invariably I have to record what I'm hearing. And that takes a little step towards, you know, doing SWAT. We do a lot of car crashes, a lot of fight things, and there's sound in there that can leave a nice base layer for post, so that they have something to build from.
Recording sounds in nature is so much fun. Just anything you can grab. It's a lot of fun. I agree.
I've been lucky enough to spend some time in rainforests and walking around with biologists, getting species specific, and it really is. It's fun to hear nature in its environment.
So quick little question. So from nature, which is like super quiet sounds, to like we were saying, car noises and stuff. How would you record nature versus cars in terms of microphones and stuff?
Right. Well, nature sound, I like to do an MS recording mostly. That gives me a certain surround sound almost to it. And then also binaurally as well. Placing one simple microphone in a nest will get you a lot of very interesting sound. But by pulling back a little bit in an MS pattern, you can feel the environment a little bit more. But when I was working with Bernie, we built Zoom museum installations as well as CDs and cassettes, and that and the sound going around your head, the actual environment, as if you were in the environment, is what's most seductive to me.
I would really like to hear more about stereo configurations, what you would use where and how and why, those kinds of things. Like you said, you just mentioned you use an MS. Why would you prefer an MS over like an XY? Or I know Decatrees are more like for drums and stuff.
Right, but it gives me a center focus is what I like about MS. I can say this is where my specific sound is coming from, but I want to get the environment around that specific sound.
MS gives you the ability to either be very focused on one thing, or to open it up and hear the context within which it was recorded.
I have a question here from Daniel McNamara about which mid-side setup do you like to use? Did you build your own, or excuse me, or do you have a store-bought version?
Primarily, I use the Sheps microphones, using figure 8 as well as the MK4 capsule, 41 capsule.
Some people use the 30 and the 40 as the MS situation. I think that's quite popular.
I imagine so. It's a nice mic, both of them.
And what about the Ambisonics? So when did you start using Ambisonics?
Boy, when? The key is for me is to get the general, when I'm doing nature sounds, is to get the ambient, the direct relationship between what my ears are hearing and what nature is exposing to them. So, you know, there's a lot of different facets to that, and a binaural recording can come in a handful of different ways. There's no specific to me that I love the most.
I was asking about ambisonic, but I just realized that you were mentioning binaural rather than ambisonic. Have you found yourself in a situation in which you've wanted to use the ambisonic, whether in TV production or just in nature?
No. I'll be honest with you, I haven't used much of it. I gravitate to what I've already have in my kit, and I use that.
So can we start with cars? Oh, I see. I'm taking over. All right. So yeah, I'd actually like to find out more about cars. That's my I've my very little experience. I've recorded. I've worked on a reality car show where they used to hop up these crazy, dragsters, and those things were so loud. And that's where I first purchased my high noise cans so that I could withstand that. And that's also where I learned that no condenser microphone will record a car without an exhaust system. So that is something that I haven't actually gotten to delve really deep into, but I would really like to know more about how to record super loud cars.
Well, from my perspective, it's a multitude of microphones at different attenuations, because dynamic as well as condenser, and different proximities as well. The sound comes from all over the vehicle, not just one specific port. And obviously, if you stick a microphone right next to an exhaust pipe, it's just going to blow the diaphragm right out.
Right on. Oh, I'd like to welcome Watson Wu. Welcome, Watson Wu. Just joined.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome, Watson. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
So you mentioned dynamic. That's going to be close up to the car, obviously, correct? And then you're going to have some sort of how far? Like, I'm talking like dragster car or like race car. How far away will you actually need to put a condenser microphone so it won't, kill it?
That's tough. That's a proximity. When you're on the set, you can tell, what your microphone is doing. You have to listen to it. And I like to get it as close as I can to the sound source without the dBs throwing the diaphragm out.
So you might have your gain at 0 for that.
Practically, maybe not all the way at 0, but as low as I possibly can. I don't like to use any filters either when I'm doing those recordings, because I want to be able to have the full range that the microphone will pick up. And it really, proximity is a key. If you get too close to the sound source, what you're not going to be able to do is retrieve anything because of the sound pressure level. And so it's really a trial and error and protection. Rather than just one microphone, I use several microphones. So if one doesn't get it, something else will be standing by that might be able to pick it up, and also at different levels as well.
Cool. Watson, do you have any preferred way to record loud cars, race cars, stuff like that?
Just like what Paul said, can everybody hear me?
Yeah. Great.
I use as many from 8 to 12 onboard microphones, and I had to record a NASCAR for a NASCAR game, so I've used the Shure mic pads that can cut as much as 25 decibels, and there are other mic pads out there that could cut 50 to 60, insane amount of decibels. So if you have a dynamic mic and it's still not strong enough to withstand the exhaust and engine, you want to plug it directly into the pads and a pad into the recorder or mixer and control from there. So what I like about those pads is that you could engage. So the Shure mic pads, you could do 0, negative, up to negative 25, and switch it back and forth. So I like Shure, I like Rode, I like Sennheiser, all kinds of dynamic mics. The DPA condenser mics can take a lot of pounding. If after the session, check out my YouTube video of a Jaguar. So just type in Watson Wu Jaguar, and you can see the different places where I put microphones. And then in the video, you hear different perspectives of the sounds from the engine, from the exhaust, what they sound like. So I could be as close, right next to the engine block, right next to exhaust. It could be literally a few inches away or right next to it, depending on the car. When in doubt, just bring a lot of mic pads and dynamic handheld vocal mics. Cardioid, great. Even Omni as well. As much as possible. So it depends on what you're after and what kind of car it is. Is it like a muscle car, or is it more like a NASCAR, which has more mid-range? So just bring as much as possible. A lot of times I'll bring 2 large Pelican cases and a backpack, just as much as possible to see what I can use.
So I have a question. Is when it comes to recording car effects, Watson and Gene and whoever wants to chime in, is the goal to record as many sources around the car simultaneously, or do you like to individually record separately, all like the exhaust or the interior or the tire squeals? Is there any added advantage to being able to capture multiple sources in the same move at once, or how does that approach?
I tend to do both at the same time. You know, with so much gear you can bring, I'll do an onboard recorder. Let's say a 8-track recorder. And I'll record all 8 tracks of that vehicle on board at the same time as I'm standing outside. And what I've been doing this past few years is I'll use 2 different mics outside the vehicle for the external passengers. For example, I'll do a handheld shotgun mic or a mid-side track in the vehicle as it's passing me. And at the same time, on a stand fixed on the ground is either a XY or TF or Ambisonic mic, and so I could capture all at the same time. So the goal is to capture as much as possible. So if you have on board, you'll get all of those in the same take. So if it's casual driving, you'll have the casual of the engine in the same timeline as the casual exhaust. So that's what I do. That's that way. If the camera changes, well, you have the exhaust, or you have the cab or the engine.
Now, this is an incredible amount of metadata that you need to label tracks, because if you're recording 8 tracks of different parts of a car, I mean, how do you get into the metadata and labeling? Is there a specific protocol for that so that the post people can find things easily? That's one thing I've never been able to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I tend to just right away speak into the mic, usually before, and then sometimes if it's something relevant at the very end, I'll tail slate and say, this happened at 1 minute 5 seconds. So I actually say engine left TPA 4062, cab above driver, another DPA, and the exhaust left, I'll say Sennheiser 421. So I'll say all those things first, right before I start recording, just so that years later I could always go back and say, all right, this is what happened. Because a lot of times you don't have time to put the microphone down and type on your phone or write it down.
So you could a regular voice ID for each track, the microphone being used and the position.
Yes, just right away, and then when I'm done, I'll actually write on a spreadsheet in detail what happens at what positioning, for example.
Nice. Paul and Gene, does it work the same way for you guys?
Yeah, as far as like me, most of my stuff is, like I said, I don't get full days with a car or even whatever. I even told I'll get an hour and it ends up being 20 minutes. So yeah, as far as labeling tracks, it's voice ID. And as far as, trying to do as many options of the car as I can, a lot of my stuff, I've had to do while they're shooting. So which obviously limits what I'm recording. But yeah, eventually just through the day, trying to get pretty much every type of possible option, going through their shot lists, as far as car commercials, whatnot, seeing what they're shooting to, figure out what sounds they need. And obviously they usually have a pretty comical dream list of everything that they want. They want to hear a transmission shifting 10 times, which is not going to happen, which is kind of comical. But yeah, no, it's just, for me, it's always been taking what we can get when we can get it, moving fast, and then hopefully, at some points through the day, we get to do a full setup, the larger mics, mounted on the outside of the car, Commercial world, I usually, try to get into pre-pro, and ask that, if there is a second car that we can use purely to go do sound stuff. Obviously I'll do stuff while they're shooting certain shots as well. But then, yeah, also, usually we need an additional stunt car driver. So it's all just, planning that out and, yeah, just getting what we can on the day and making as many notes for post as possible, which is, tricky.
Hey, Watson, I wanted to go back and ask you about when you're referring to the pads, you're referring to like inline attenuators, signal attenuators, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to get confused and think that you were talking about a physical pad or something, because even with an inline attenuator of any sort, you still have to be careful that the microphone that you're using, that you're not going to bottom out the capsule. In other words, I mean, the microphone itself has to be able to withstand to generate a signal that's worth recording, right?
Yep.
So,
I'll post a link of what I
That's-
use and versus others. There are others I would like to try. I just haven't had a chance to experiment.
okay.
That brings me to another question. Gain settings and limiters. Watson, I know I've seen a bunch of your videos. I know you use the 442, the great 442,
Yeah.
and there is definitely a reason for that. Can you expand on all that?
442 is my personal opinion, the greatest mixer for loud sounds. Although I also use it for extremely quiet sounds too. But when I have a doubt, I bring those. I own 3 of them. And if there are more on sale and later, I'm going to buy them. And if there are problems, I'll just have sound devices fix them up for me. I just love how they sound and how they handle the excessive loud sounds I record.
Okay, and Paul and Gene, how about gain settings? Like, how would you go to, set up the gain structure for recording a loud car?
For me, it's trial and error. It just comes from a little bit of, I'd say experience. I always try to, obviously do multiple runs of everything, but usually when it comes to, things that I'm going to be concerned about, I'll have them go do, a couple minute, little run, whatever, and then I will play it back and just listen to everything and just make my adjustments as needed. And it's also, it's not obviously always down, depending on certain parts of, engine compartment or, interior, depending on what you're trying to record. It's obviously, usually, I tend to set things a lot lower than I actually need to. So then I can, make sure I can boost up what I need also to capture, certain specific sounds. But yeah, it's a lot of trial and error and playing back. I've done a lot of, ride along as well. I've kind of got nicknamed with one company. They called me a green machine because I'd always throw up. Wearing noise canceling headphones, squeezing on your head, looking down at your meters while the car's, driving around. It doesn't last long.
They can always count on you, huh?
Yeah.
Machine. I like that. That's funny.
Yeah. So it's a lot of trial and error and just, making sure you're playing back, what, you've done and then making adjustments if needed. A lot of times, depending on, shooting schedule, you don't always have that, option. So at that point, I'll also, depending on what it is, and obviously what I have with me, double mic, the same source with different structures and possibly different microphones as well.
Yeah, I do the same. I have a set of microphones that I use regularly, so I'm fairly familiar with how they react to the sound source. And so there's some general gain settings that I'll start with, but really you have to go through the motions to find out how accurate you are, and playback is the best way to know that.
Rehearsals, I guess, would be super important, obviously, when possible.
You don't always get them. So a lot of times what you do is you favor on the light side so that you don't overmodulate, because that's the end of the world.
Right on. I see Eric Magnus has a question. He had his hand up for a while.
Hey.
Am I on? I don't know. I haven't done this before.
There you are. Hey
Yeah.
there.
You're doing great.
Everybody. I've had success using this Audio-Technica BP 4025 XY mic.
That's a good mic.
I used it. It's a large diaphragm mic, stereo mic, and I used it on a feature I was mixing where our hero car was a BMW 8i or i8.
I8.
Yeah, hybrid car.
Mhm.
And it took like 45 minutes when we wrapped with the transpo captain, and we drove around, slammed the doors, started it up, opened the hood, any kind of sound I could get. And Post was very happy with it and said it made it into the soundtrack. It's, I think, about $500, maybe $650, so it's not too expensive, and it's low self noise.
Can you hold that up again? Yeah.
Yeah,
What's it called again?
It's got a pad. It's the Audio-Technica BP 4025 XY, and it has a low-cut filter and a 10 dB pad.
That's one of my favorite mics for pass-bys. So if you have it on the mic stand, it's great for XY stereo pass-by.
Yeah.
At BP, what was the rest of it?
4025.
Okay.
And Rycote makes a ball gag for it.
Mhm.
And this, I forget which mount this is, but it's for other mics, but it works nicely. It's kind of top heavy, front heavy.
Yeah.
So you have a solid shock mount for it if you're going to hand hold it, which sometimes I do.
I thought about adding some kind of a circular weight to the rear. That way it's balanced because it is very front heavy.
Yeah.
If you look at Charles Denon's mix of the Pennzoil Ferrari, a yellow Ferrari, a lot of the external shots was from that microphone, the
Uh-huh.
4025. Great microphone.
And I'd like to mention also in this dangerous times we're in, when we all go back to work, just so the deep state cannot control our mixes, I think we should all purchase one of these on Amazon. I received this as an anonymous gift from Amazon. I don't know who sent it to me, but I think it's going to come in handy.
It's hilarious.
I think there's a current firmware update for that, so you better make sure that it's
Funny.
Cool.
Well, you know,
Chris,
Eric,
sorry.
if you're wearing that, maybe you shouldn't be on Zoom.
Well, you know, you can't be too careful these days, but I have upgraded the latest Zoom 5.02 software update before I logged on today.
Chris Weckler had a question, had his hand up.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, nice shave, man.
Oh boy, thanks. Monday.
What do the rest of the passengers say?
They don't talk much.
You don't need to look back at them ever. You're always like forward.
Yeah, he doesn't move. But anyway, I was curious for some of the guys. Like I guess Watson, I know you've done a lot of video game sound effects as well as sound effects for movies. Do you know if there's any particular big differences in the way that you approach if it's going to be for video games as opposed to movies, or vice versa? What are the big differences in how you approach what you capture and what you provide them?
Video games are usually a lot more. For example, let's say a racing game. Let's just say Need for Speed. Need for Speed, you race and you win fictitious money, and you take that money and you get a bigger exhaust, you get a turbo for the engine or a supercharger, and you could go faster. So with Need for Speed, for example, we have to use a lot more microphones as much as possible so that we could, if you modify your vehicle, let's say you have a Porsche 911, you get new exhaust. That way, when you get it modified and you get on the street to race again, it sounds meaner, sounds bigger than life. So in In movies, you're able to do a lot more takes. And we usually do something called ramp. A ramp is what you put your car in first gear, and still in first gear, you drive up to the red line. So as smooth as possible to the red line. And that could be 12 to 15 seconds long from start to finish. So you ramp up and then you ramp down. So when you continue to go up, you're still in first gear. So that RPM is going crazy up, screaming. Sound like the car's gonna explode. And so we do a lot of that. And so the software, like in a PlayStation game, will take that ramp and drive it. So when you squeeze the throttle, it's gonna go up. And when it gets a red line, it will do it again, pitched. So it sounds like you're going from first gear to second gear and so on. So it always sounds like you're shifting. So it's almost got that feel of Fast and the Furious, where you could shift 20 times in a car and it sounds cool in a fake world, of course. And whereas film, it's here's the scene. We want multiple takes of that scene. So yeah, so that's the difference in games, is that you got to do a lot more.
Steve Gonzalez, I'm sorry for cutting you off, Watson. We're just seeing someone's screen share. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, we do have to do a lot more channels, but specifically we're after the ramp sounds and steady RPMs. You know, steady as in we want 2,000 RPM for 30 seconds long. We want 10,000 RPM for however many seconds long. In film, we want specific sounds of that shot. So that's the differences between the two.
Yeah, personally, I'm sure you've dealt with this, Watson, but it's like whenever I've only done a couple video game things, but it's funny, like the people I was working with anyways didn't want to actually hear road noise, which is kind of comical. So which is, you know, as we know, it's like, well, that's impossible. Especially exhaust, you know, tires, all that, even engine. So whenever I've done video game stuff, I try to, you know, schedule them or get them to pay for putting the car on an axle dyno, where they can actually put the car up and program it to exactly what they want it to do. Mm-hmm. And then you get, you know, no road noise that way.
Yeah. There's a particular dyno that's called Dynapax, where you literally take the tires off, and these huge machines that attach to where the wheels go. So literally, whereas regular rolling dyno, the tires are touching the dyno.
Yeah, that's what an axle dyno. Just different terminology.
Okay, yeah. So Dynapax, yeah. So that way you're not getting the tire sounds. I've had bad experiences with using dyno and Dynapaxes. First of all, they usually run those things with the big industrial fans running at the same time, cooling the vehicle. And I've had a Ferrari on a dyno shut down on me because the computer says, in the Ferrari says, okay, the tires are going 90 miles per hour, but the vehicle is not moving. So the Ferrari decided to shut itself off. I was freaking out. I'm thinking, I can't afford this to repair this Ferrari. So I tend to like recording on the road. So what I do is I use handheld vocal mics, cardioid, so that if the mic is here, it's only going to capture a short proximity. It's almost like the lead singer of a rock band. He's singing, but that mic is not going to capture the drums behind him or the guitar next to him. It's going to be that short proximity. So what I've done is I put the mic sideways next to the exhaust rather than down. Down, you're going to get more road noise. So if you can, you could try to get below it and sort of point upwards or next to it. That way, you're not going to get that road noise by pointing down at the exhaust or sort of down at the exhaust. That's from some of the experience I've done is I did. But some cars, road noise is going to be a problem anyway, and then others. So the key is to try to record loud cars so that the exhaust is going to overpower everything else, for example.
Yeah, and I'll make a quick little note. I found out, kind of hard on my first car job that was a high performance car.
Mhm.
Never put the mic too close to the exhaust. They can catch fire.
Oh yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Which mic was it?
It was at that time. It was a 421.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah, it was the fur that caught fire, just the hair too
Oh.
close.
Wow. Okay. So next time when in doubt, maybe use a cheap 57.
Oh yeah, no, that's
That's the
the way
first
I do
one.
from here on out. Yep. But like I
Yeah.
said, that was my
and that
first high performance car.
Yeah.
that would be my follow-up. You put a dynamic there, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the exhaust.
Again, like personally, multiple options. Again, but yeah, most of the time dynamic.
I've heard and read and even tried it on my own, putting lavaliers in certain places in the car, get certain engine noise. You know, to get the head really nicely, you can get certain parts of the engine noise or the exhaust. You know, anything you want to get really.
Yeah,
That's
I've a lot of my stuff is all the DPA 4062. Like that's especially like I said, I'm having to do most of my shooting or recording while shooting. So it's like having to have lavs and on the microdot where I can run extension cables. So everything's wrapped in the car and then all the cables are, going back down into the trunk or out of the trunk and then back into the cab of the car where the recorder is. But yeah, no, a lot of the lavs can, take that, but especially the 4062.
Yeah, those are fantastic mics. I have two of those, and yeah, they could maybe take a pounding and keep going.
So since we're talking about mics, I have a question. Since in your craft of capturing sound effects and sometimes very sensitive sounds, regarding the evolution of lav mics for the last 5-6 years, do you see a point where lav mics could potentially be as good as some of the regular mics that you've been using, the Sheps, the 57s, the 421s? Do you foresee lav mics getting to a point where you could actually rely on them to capture that same caliber sound as the old standbys, since you've listened to them with such great detail?
Who is this question towards?
It's to all three of you. Watson, Gene, and Paul.
I think for the most part it could, but you'll get to a point where the size of the mic does matter.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some really loud recordings where I think, let me use the 4062 in other mics, and I was surprised that the bigger mass mics did a better job. So, but I do believe most part that they're going to get better. The new Shure Twinplex mics are fantastic. They've done they're really rivaling the DPAs to capture the real loud. But yeah, I do think it's going to get better and replace a lot of the bigger mics. I do believe that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like, I mean, I'd say probably 80% of all of my engine, based stuff, turbos, all that stuff, superchargers, are all off the lavs, the 4062s. Obviously that's the really deep, sound, that's where the larger mics really, help. So anything on car, like a lot of my spots that I'm like kind of most proud of have all been primarily, at least the engine sounds aspect of off the lavaliers. Because that's what was, we were able to do, but it also like, performance wise and the outcome of it is what I would been, was really happy with.
I would agree with that too. I use a lot of lav mics inside the vehicle, inside of areas that don't take a lot of wind to get specific engine knock sounds or interior sounds, floorboards. But so far, nothing has been able to overcome the sense of a large diaphragm. It's a very smooth sound.
I have a question from Chris Welker. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so another thing is, a lot of the people in this group, I would imagine, are production sound mixers. And, because of that, we tend to be dealing, at least I'll speak for myself. I tend to deal with working on features, a lot of times where we want to get these extra sounds like of the driving scenes, but you know, you have to deal with the fact that the camera could at times you know, see those kinds of things on the outside. So hiding the mics on the outside when you know it might be a free drive shot, you know, I've come up with a couple of techniques of my own that seem to work for me. I'm curious if you have any suggestions on, you know, when you're dealing with putting mics out in the open where you don't want to see them. You know, do you have any suggestions for things like wind protection? And do you ever do anything as far as like spoilers or anything to, you know, reject the wind from hitting the mic capsules, things like that?
For me personally, you know, again, most of my stuff is done while shooting. So yeah, putting stuff on the exterior of the car has always been, you know, big like, oh no, we see that, freak out, whatever. It's always, you know, talking with car prep. You know, they've, you know, actually have put holes in, because most time for car commercial and even features, you know, they trash the car afterwards, which is heartbreaking. So it's like, yeah, they'll put a hole for, you know, me to put a mic through a certain spot to be able to get it, you know, not visible. Or, you know, just talking with, you know, seeing if there's anyone from post on board, and also the director, but like, look, this is what I can do. It's a small dot on the side of the car. This, you know, this is the only time we have to get that sound. Do you want to paint it out? And obviously it's just being blunt, and, you know, I hate saying it, but what my usual go-to is like, you know, I'll give you the best that you're allowing me to get. So it's just, you know, checking with them. And then just mainly car prep. I mean, that's especially, you know, just sidetrack, you know, for engine stuff. Like some of the best, you know, sounds that I wouldn't have like even thought where to put mics have been because I have like a, you know, one of the engineers there, and they're like, oh, this sound right in here is really where you want it to go. But anyways, and then also as far as like wind, you know, for a while I was, you know, I used to do this a lot more. But, you know, I had made my own little, you know, carbon fiberglass little windshields for lavs that, you know, then were, you know, domed and then flat on one side. And, you know, they would just basically stick to a car, and yeah, it just helps, you know, avoid the wind. But, you know, and obviously just the typical bumblebees, koalas, whatever you have, anything from Maricote.
Do you by chance have that that carbon fiber thing available to show, or do you have any pictures of it?
I have pictures of it somewhere, but yeah, it's basically it's funny. It's if anyone's from, obviously we're all probably familiar with Hydamike, you know, his amounts. It's basically a slightly larger version of that. You know, it's just like you said, the log goes in the center, but it's, you know, it's probably about an inch tall to be able to fit the windscreen. So by the time you're looking in it, it's completely, you know, it's all you're seeing is a little wind bubble, and then the outside shell of it, it's just domed for air to not catch, and it's like I said, one flat side just to stick onto the car. So
You tape it on, or you sticky Joe, or?
You double stick tape. You know, the other thing I'll just kind of mention, you know, real quick, I'm sure Watson's deals with this a lot. Again, obviously, like I was mentioning, as far as putting mics on a car, always check with car prep before you just go taping anything. Gaff tape, they usually freak out, even most paper tape. And if you are doing any type of suction cup or anything, they usually have vinyl they put over the paint first, because if you use a suction cup on a metallic paint, it can actually pull the metallic paint together and create a spot on the car. So yeah, just always check with car prep on that.
Just to add one thing, if I can as well. One of the things that I protect against is when I'm trying to block the wind from actually hitting the microphone, is not to change the timbre of the microphone. Sometimes people try to put a microphone underneath a bumper or someplace where it's exceptionally echoey or has a different timbre than the actual natural sound of the car. So I'd be careful about using anything that's going to change the timbre of the microphone.
And do you guys, I don't know if this was covered while I was running around trying to fix my internet problems. Do you guys put mics in the wheel wells to catch tire screeches and other mechanical sounds?
I do.
I I typically try to avoid in the wheel well, and the reason being is because of what I just said, because it does change the timbre a little bit. I prefer to have the microphone on the outside, or at least as low as I can on the wheel well.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I typically have gone from the outside and then one facing forward, one facing backwards. Usually, and that's where I'll have like, you know, if I'm able to, like some type of suction cup mount.
Thank you.
I usually use wheel well when I have to capture car skidding sounds, burnouts, drifting. That's one of the areas I put it in. But to answer the question from Chris, if you have to conceal mics, what's a good area? It's a license plate in the back of the vehicle. You could put a lavalier back there and really conceal it so that no camera is going to really capture what's there. And hopefully the car is loud enough with exhaust that it will come out well, because that's a lot of times that's too far from the exhaust. But I usually use the Ryco Mini Windjammer for the lavalier and put it right above the license plate and, you know, gaff tape it in that area, so it's nice and clean.
I think Carl had a question.
Yes, hello. I was wondering what your favorite suicide mics were. By that I mean, you know, the almost expendable ones that still like have a good sound, but you won't be heartbroken because, you know, it's gone. I mean, I've seen melted 57s on rocket launching platforms. It's like, yeah, no biggie, but we got that sound, you know, that kind of thing. So your preferred suicide mics, and maybe even your least preferred because you actually lost what you cared about.
Who was this question towards?
I think it was directed to all of you, but Watson, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, the 57, 58. I like the Rode M1 a lot. I killed a few extreme stuff.
What killed him?
Getting run over, getting shot at, getting explosives, fire. So I think I've gone through maybe 8 of those. Most of the time they survive. They may look horrible, but they still work. Countryman B3, another inexpensive mic, a lavalier. Yeah, so yeah, the 57, 58 Rode M1 and Countryman B3. Yeah, those are the suicide mics. If they die, that's okay. They're inexpensive to replace, even though I don't like killing mics.
Yeah,
you got suicide mic? Oh, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say it's the same mics Watson said, but it's like, you know, honestly, it's like, you know, I always, you know, not lecture, but go over with production before I'm micing a car, because once I have to put, you know, 4062 like in an engine compartment and then run the wire through a door and all that, I tell them like, look, wire gets pinched the wrong way. It's a new mic, you know, it is what it is. So they all kind of end up being suicide mics one way or another, or at least we're going to shorten the cable of them, depending where it gets pinched, if it does. But, you know, I had, you know, it's, for me, it's always just been, you know, making production aware of, you know, what we're doing.
They may have to pay for the funeral, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's what insurance is for, you know.
I thought they were trying to give you 2 lavaliers in one.
Yeah, well, one way or another. But yeah, then the other, I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, out of hands too. Like a feature I did is called Act of Valor. You know, I mic'd for sound effects and, you know, dialogue in that feature. So, but it's like we would go from talking to, and, you know, most of that movie was live fire. You know, and everything. And, you know, we go from that full on machine gun, you know, and I've had, you know, plenty of mics just, you know, just get destroyed. The 62s even, you know, just from repetitive, you know, it can only take so much for so long. So like I said, it is kind of like just, in a sense, miking, you know, for, you know, what you have to do. And then just, it is what it is kind of after that. But yeah, obviously if you feel like, you know, something's going to happen, then yeah, I mean, even, yeah, a lot of any of the dynamics that are pretty inexpensive at that point.
That was a great sounding picture. Good job.
Yeah, it was fun because there was no B units, so we got to do both, which was made it, you know, kind of twice as hard because doing sound effects and dialogue, but it was fun.
Good.
All you have a want to weigh in on suicide mics?
The same, the 5758. But my Sankins are my go-to, and they get hammered every now and then.
Hey, I have a question for Paul. I haven't watched the new show SWAT, but I did watch the one that was out in the 70s. Are you using those custom-made trucks as well as the personnel carriers? And how are those different from any other type of four-wheel vehicle that you might have recorded in the past?
Well, they are the armored vehicles that we drive around, the MRAP and such. They have a unique sound, and so I've been through those several times. Practically every season, I go through one or two of them. Scotty and I, we get in the car and we just drive around. And I have several microphones placed not only on the outside but also on the inside. I want to hear the gears shift. I want to hear even the brake pedal go on. And I want to hear the knobs of the tires as they go around the bend. And the doors opening and closing. I'll go through all of those sound effects to give those to my post people so that they have some really good actual sounds of those vehicles.
So you go through them as if it were a video game, with the going through the gears and everything.
Absolutely. I record them on set as best as I can. And if time permits, and sometimes just before we go to lunch or something, I'll get an opportunity to jump in and do a separate drive by myself. Now, I don't do that on every shot every day, but when the opportunity arises, I definitely take advantage of it.
But if I understand correctly, at the beginning of the season, they let you do, I guess, a day or something like that. And if that's the case, do you go to a racetrack? Do you do it on the lot, or what do you normally do?
Our stages are up in Santa Clarita, and we have down on Kearney Avenue, we have our back lot basically, which is the SWAT a motor pool. And we'll drive around there, and we'll also take the roads that are around that industrial area in Santa Clarita. And, sometimes we can get up a little bit of speed too, going around the corners, because that's what we do. But then it's just simple stopping the vehicle and doing the mechanical sounds, getting in, starting it up and stuff like that, so that they have those actual sounds when they go to post.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys have covered, have we moved on from vehicles? You guys want to move on to firearms, or what's, any other questions about cars? I can stay with you, Paul, if that's okay. Can I ask you the same question about the firearms, like at the beginning of the season or at the beginning of the show? Did you have like a chance to do all of the firearms that are going to be used?
Well, I don't usually take the moment to do all the firearms in advance. I do them actually when we're filming. And sometimes if there's a unique sounding, like a bigger armament that we use, then I'll past few seasons it's been Craig, but we'll get somebody else to fire the weapon so that I can have a few different microphone placements. I'm always planting ambient microphones throughout the set all the time. I've got many tracks, I might as well use them. And I've also got an extension through my utility to plant a mic over there, plant a mic over there. And I take advantage of those moments. There's so much camera setup. If I can be efficient in my recording gear, then I can reach out and I can get those specific sounds, because they come and sometimes they're very unique. And I don't want to miss that opportunity if it arises.
Do they typically use half loads or any different from that?
Yeah, they typically say half loads, but sometimes they sound more like full loads. A lot of times they use full loads because they want to see that muzzle flash. So we get a variety. And then also some of the other actors, they don't want a big sounding gun, so they'll go for a quarter load. So really it fluctuates. And I have not only the boom microphone and the lavaliers, because I boom and I mic and I lav everything all the time, but then I'll have different perspectives, and I don't always face right at the sound. Sometimes I'm looking for the reflection of the sound, and so I'll position my microphone opposite of the actual gunfire, because it travels along a certain path, and that just broadens the sound. It gives it more bulk.
That's great. And for plants, what mics do you like to use?
Well, my go-tos are my Sheps and my Sennheisers. I like a variety of microphones, but I try to match my microphones for the actual event. And for me, the 416 and the Sanken and the Sheps are fairly well suited together. I don't want to pull a microphone that's so oddly sounding that it's difficult for post to fit it into the mix. But what I also do is I don't like to use a lot of compression when it comes to those gunfire sounds. I like to try to attenuate down, so I'm just specifically setting up the recorder to hear the loud sound and not all the quiet sounds. I find that the internal limiters of the machines that I use want to add an artifact that doesn't sound natural to my ear.
Paul, could you tell me again which show it is that you're talking about where you do all this?
SWAT, it's a CBS series.
SWAT, okay, thanks.
Watson, would you like to chime in on firearms, or are you mostly specialized on vehicles?
Both. The firearms, the way I think of it, the cars, I'm after specific sounds and rejecting unwanted wind sounds, unwanted road noise sounds. Whereas firearms, I want everything. I want the crack of the weapon, the boom of it, and the tail end of it. So I have microphones for all those areas. I have mics on the weapon, mics next to the weapons, middle distance, as in 12 to 20 meters away. Far distance, it could be as far as 150 meters away. That's how far we're going. Yeah, I like a lot of Sennheisers. Use Rode for a lot of gunshots. NTG3, the new NTG5. I like the Sennheiser 8040s. So there are a lot of different mics that really do well and can handle the pounding all the time. So, but to me, gunshot is more about interacting with the analog limiters. If you don't have really the analog limiters, a lot of gunshots sound like popcorn, very boring, just mediocre. So that's a thing with recording them. You have to hit them hard, but hit it hard where do you want good distortions or just below distortions? That's where the fine line of the mix is. As I'm recording them, I'll have the shooter do the same shot from that same position again and again. So he'll shoot and be very quiet. And then I would say, okay, let's say it's a pump action shotgun. I'll say shoot, and he will shoot, and he will keep his finger on the trigger until I say okay. Then he will let go of the trigger for that extra click, that extra unwanted click, for example. So we might do 10 to 15 good takes of single shots of a shotgun, for example, and then move on to something else. So if it's something like a full automatic weapon, I'll again start with single shots, and then I'll say, okay, let's do short bursts. So just something short. And again, he's gonna, time it where he could let go of the trigger without having a click sound. So if you could let go in time with the short burst and long burst, and he's doing a good job. So I'll do that again and again, and I'll adjust as I'm listening. I'm listening to each of the inputs as I'm recording rather than the whole left and right mix. That's what I do. I solo input one, I'll adjust until I like where I like it, and I'll go to input 4, for example. And there's certain mics do better than others. Another a good way to practice is to take balloons, blow them up as big as you can without blowing them up, and have somebody pop the balloons. That's a good way to practice how to deal with a quick bang and over for the initial crack. That's the hardest part, is to deal with how do you deal with such loud sounds. And from experience of bringing clients with me who've never recorded gunshots, you're always gonna jump. Every time, I'm sure Paul knows about it, every time a shot goes off, you're jumping. And it takes a while to get used to that. And so I've had to calm down especially my British customers come over, and some of my Asian customers, I think, hey, it's okay. You have to get used to that. Get used to it and get to like those recoil moments. And that's what I've learned. It took me 6 times at the range to get used to and calm down and to concentrate on the mix while you're being pounded on. And a lot of times you're recording quiet, but I would encourage you that once you get used to it, record bold, but in a way that you still have the gun shot, but not over the top. So my school of thought is that I want aggressive sounds, but I still want to give the editors, sound designers room to compress, manipulate, mangle to their liking. I don't like it when a library, for example, is over processed. If I buy this, well, there's nothing else I could do with it. And to me, that's not appealing. I like it when it's aggressive, but I can still play with it. And that's the way I think if somebody wants hiring. So, and of course, I talk to the customer first. What kind of sounds are you looking for? Are there any examples on YouTube or anything? You could email me. Yeah, so that's how I think about firearms.
And when you go to the range for a video game, do they typically use live rounds or always blanks?
Most of the time, live rounds, because a lot of these weapons, they function with live ammunition. I've done recordings like with Call of Duty, Modern Warfare. We had to do captures of the way gunshots reverberate in urban environment, outside and inside. So we had to use blanks because we didn't want to destroy property or hurt anybody. But we use full blanks because we want the loud, intense sounds. And sometimes the full blanks, I don't know about Paul, but they're sometimes louder than live firearm because there's no projectile. So there's more room to put more gunpowder. And we did a 50 cal Bear rifle. It was the loudest thing in the world because the blank was so specialized made. It literally sounded like explosions far away. So yeah, most of the time it's live fire. But when you deal with blanks, they jam, they don't feed well, they get dirty very quickly. So when I deal with that, I have the armor bring 2 of the same weapon. That way you could have the other guy clean that weapon, and when it's overused, it gets too hot, they swell. So blanks are hard to deal with. So I'm very surprised with the armors who can deal with those very well, day in and day out.
Any stories of suicide mics on the range?
I had an old AKG 3000, a studio mic. It just died. Just died one day. I was not happy because I really did like that mic.
But not from gunshot wounds, right?
No, but when it died, we actually shot it just to see who could shoot it. So my former assistant, she has it at her desk. It's got a big dash in there. She's good. But yeah, most of the time, no. A lot of these mics I mentioned, they could take the pounding. I would say it's more about the weather changes or long days, super long days of recording that kill the microphone. You know, I record in the desert for gunfire a lot, and the change of humidity. I've seen mics that just can't do it. You know, like the Sanken CSS5. I call it the Prozac mic. It sounds great for the first half an hour, and then it stops performing. And I would get mad at it. I thought I killed 2 of them, but both of them did the same thing. They just, over the day, they get tired. And whereas the Sennheisers just keep going, the Sennheiser and the Neumann's far away, they just keep going. They're workhorses. So I don't know what Paul's experience with all that.
I have the same experience: humidity and environmental effects and length of time recording on the same microphones. I've got several microphones that I change out throughout the day when I feel like a mic has gotten tired.
Yeah.
Paul, do you have any incidents or stories from SWAT in terms of firearms that you can share?
No, you know, we've been fairly careful. I always try to make sure that my microphone is in a proper spot, so it's going to be, you know, away from the accident or the tragedy. Although I have had, especially in car rigs, some microphones get flung out or flung to the next, you know, the passenger side or something like that. But so far, I haven't had anything, unless it's, you know, human induced by my own team, been damaged during filming.
Somebody had asked earlier about suction cups. I've used suction cups myself, and I find them to be quite reliable as long as you keep pumping them and keep checking on them after every shot. I'm curious if you guys have any comments on that. Paul, suction cups, good?
I use suction cups all the time, and you know, for me, a microphone isn't a set it and forget it. You've got to constantly look at it. The car comes back, or the stunt is over. You look at your microphones. Are they still in the same position? Are they pointed where you want them? And if they're not, then you have to redirect the diaphragm. And that's one of the things that I have to keep up on my people, because if that microphone isn't pointed at that specific spot for take two, it's going to sound completely different, and I don't want that.
And has any?
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, as far as suction cups, you know, I always tape the edges afterwards, and then same thing, always repump it after, you know, just periodically check in, because, yeah, especially on the cars, you know, when they're, you know, drifting around a corner, you know, hitting a lot of bumps, whatever, you know, things happen, it gets pulled on the mic, and just having that extra little seal around the edge of them, I found does help them last a little bit longer.
Thank you. I'm curious if any of you has recorded military equipment or any other kind of industrial machine that's out of the ordinary that you may want to share with us.
A Abrams tank.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much anything.
Those 69 tons, and yeah, don't get in the way. Those things you cannot suction cup, because the armor is such a unique material that no suction cup could get on there. We've had to use cable ties, zip ties, and gaff tape when we can to get certain mics in certain places. So yeah, when they're armored, they're odd. They're harder to deal with.
Again, yeah, for myself, for that, because yeah, the active valor, you know, so it was all legit, you know, whatever. I mean, we were on nuclear sub for a week, you know, aircraft carriers, dealing with Harrier jets, taking off all that stuff. But yeah, tanks, and like Watson said, a lot of stuff just doesn't stick. So again, you know, I've made myself all these magnetic mounts. They're actually, you know, trigger release. So it's like, you know, because once it's on there, you can't pull it off. But I, you know, bought these specific magnets that actually have little on-off switches, and then I've modified them from there and had custom, you know, mounting positions made for, you know, 1/4 20 or 3/8, so I can put the usual stuff on there. But a lot of magnetic stuff for, you know, temperamental things. But yeah.
Can you post a link to the on and off magnet you're just talking about?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I'll
interesting.
show you. It's a general magnet, but like I said, then I had my machine shop custom make some stuff for me. But yeah.
Good.
And Gene,
I use magnets as well, but I put a little tab on it that I could help pull it off, because magnets do help. But I find that if I don't use two of them, that they end up sliding and shifting. Maybe it's just I'm not using a.
Yeah, well, that's why, you know, I started using these magnets that have the on and off little knobs on them. Basically just changes the polarity in the magnet, or lifts it up, you know, whatever, because, you know, even like a really small magnet, you know, whatever, will have 100 pounds of pulling force on it once it's turned on.
I'm sorry, how much did you say was the force?
Well, like these little small ones that I use for, you know, lightweight, even lavaliers, it was like 100 pounds. But like I have a larger one somewhere I have to dig out that could take 300 pounds.
Per what? Per square
actually,
inch?
I think I made something similar for you guys for NBA on the, as far as the magnet, you know, lightweight stuff that could have the on and off switch. But yeah, they just come in all different sizes, and depends how much money you want to spend.
Cool.
I agree. You know, I like magnets too, but I have a tendency. I have to shift them different, because depending on what kind of microphone I have out there, if I have too much weight, it's not about the microphone coming off of the tank. I've done Sherman tanks before and stuff, but it's the fact that it wants to slide, and that's been especially if I get a little bit of an extension arm on it. And so I end up using two magnets, one to help brace it so it doesn't rotate itself away from the sound source. Please do post a link with that, the on and off. That sounds like a great device.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Whitney has posted an Amazon link for that magnet.
Yeah, we're pulling something up for it now, but it is like a generic one, but you get the idea, and whether it's from this company, which I bought stuff from, or, there's a bunch of different options out there that have different angles for, different things. So yeah, just, and some of them actually, have parts where you can do threading mounts on them too. So,
So when they say on and off, meaning you turn it off, the magnetic field?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It actually has like a little turn knob.
Okay.
So they're battery powered then?
No, it just changes from my understanding, it just, when you turn the dial, it changes the angle of the magnet a little bit. I haven't actually taken one apart, but yeah, no, they're not.
They don't need power. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good. I like that.
Until you hit the car that's all aluminum.
Or fiberglass, yep. But yeah, we're talking military, boss.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they are good for anything. I mean, I've used them for, multiple things. All right, I just sent the link for one company.
Cool.
So I had a question that I had noted from before for all three of you guys. We know that you use specialized microphones, and I guess mounts are another level from what's typically done in narrative. But would you tell us what is the one element or the set of elements, like the magnets might be a good example, that are kind of like the go-to stuff that you have for this kind of work that we wouldn't have for narrative work?
For me, it's a 4062 lavalier. Just having those, and I mean, because we're not gonna, necessarily use that for dialogue so much, just because it is so heavily padded, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. But yeah, the SPL that those can take is, very beneficial for sound effects.
Paul?
I'm with him. The 4062 is great for sound effects. I really like it as well.
Yeah, 4062 quieter, 4061. And the Rode M1, I would say those combination, for that combination, I think it mixes well. You get the really high, get the low, get in between, and they're very robust.
That's it. Just buy a couple of 4061s and I'm in business.
Yeah, that's it.
I will touch base on real quick, just back on the guns, where, a lot of times, so again, if we have the time, whatnot, it's not always about the actual, gunshot. The guns make tons of awesome sounds, just, loading, trigger, magazines, all of that stuff. So it's like, I'll usually have them, run through recordings, obviously, because my gain structure is going to be much different, for capturing those sounds of the guns versus the actual gunshot. So just kind of like a, fun little thing, because everyone seems to like to slow-mo, a gun firing nowadays. But it is, just kind of just a fun thing to, like I said, hear all the different, sounds they actually make, all the springs and clicks and whatnot.
Yeah, a lot of people who are into motorcycles, and I'm one of them, are into guns as well, because they're mechanical, because the tolerances are very tight, and because the sounds are so purposeful. And obviously that's as important as the gunshot itself. But also the ricochet and the perspective, I think, is something that's often overlooked. To have it at different distances, like Watson described. A lot of people forget about that.
Yeah, no, because that's exactly like Watson said. I mean, for guns, for me, as long as, like I said, we're able to, the more the merrier, as far as mics and positions and whatnot. Because the ways back, it's still once they mix everything together, you're going to be kind of surprised what they use. Like even for cars, I've found like, most of my, post people that I talk to that do cars, they always prefer, which at first I would have never really thought of, but I always do a stereo recording of the interior of the car for pretty much everything. Because they like, it gives them that additional little low end and, whatnot, where they can still actually hear some more, shifting of the car, just, different perspective.
I did a job for Nissan. The new Maxima came out, and they had that the sound of the car pumped into the car, which a lot of high-end cars have been doing for a few years, like Mercedes and BMW, which I think is incredibly insane. And if I could disable, I would disable it. But they wanted to record the inside of the car with the sound pumped in, and that was, I mean, besides the sounds that Gene just described, they wanted that specifically. Of course, when we get to the car and we said that we rig everything up, they find out that the pre-production model they had brought in did not have that feature. So we still recorded, of course, but
that's the car you want, right? That does not have that feature.
That's exactly right. That's the one I would have wanted.
New cars are difficult to record. They don't do what you want to do, especially video games.
They click a lot.
They click a lot. They sound like boring vacuum machines. And if I'm doing a ramp, I want to get to the red line. Well, the car will only get to 4,500 RPM. It won't give me 6 or 7, even though it's 6. It says on there you could do 6 or 7. So they are difficult. So it's easier actually to record a muscle car or a race car that you could really control. Stick shift, of course. I got a question about what you said about in the cab, left and right, Gene. Do you find that most production want interior stereo, or a lot of them are okay with just one mic mono?
Typically, I'll do stereo, and whether or not I've gotten to the point where it's like I'll just do it now, just whether or not they really ask for it or not. Because again, most of my stuff is car commercial. Their little sports car, drifting and whatnot. So yeah, most of the time I'll do it. The only time like I will, I have gotten, mics, just a regular microphone, 4061s, or, if I can fit anything larger, just on the inside, right up against the firewall, just as a different perspective. Again, just gives it kind of like that little more of a low end of the engine or even the transmission and whatnot. But, occasionally, but yeah, that's primarily it. And obviously, as we all know, the trickiest part of doing anything once that is, when car prep takes apart a car, guess where all the little nuts and screws go, is like in the door panels and the glove box and the center console. So it's just finding all the, making sure there's nothing in the car. But yeah, typically I just do the stereo. I use a little camera mount that mounts off of a headrest and positions the mic right in the middle in between the two driver seats, as long as the driver's okay with it. Either that or I'll just go right on top of the console sometimes.
I had a question to Watson. You mentioned earlier that the 442 was the best mixer for loud sounds. I'm curious about you, Paul and Gene. You guys have your like a little field bag, and you have a preferred mixer and or recorder that you want to tell us about?
I use a 688 in my field bag.
For me, it's pretty much the same kit. Depending on what I'm doing. I'm all the newer line of Zaxcom stuff, which does have Neverclip, which is very beneficial. I found just for that additional dynamic range. So a lot of the microphones that I'm using can actually, the recorder can actually meet that dynamic range a little bit for the louder sound effects. And then a lot of my stuff, I've actually used just the ZFRs, the little independent body pack recorders, or the normal Zaxcom wireless that do record, because if I'm micing up a motorcycle, I'm not going to ask the rider to wear an audio pack, and there's really not a lot of secure ways to put that type of stuff on. So I have a bunch of different little options, but I do use the Zaxcom wireless stuff a lot for the internal recordings. And some of those stuff that I've been like kind of most proud of have been they've used those little card recordings.
Unless it's a gold wing, then you can put anything in there.
Yeah, huge. Yeah.
So I have a question here from Captain Nevada about monitoring. Whether you monitor the mix or summed everything, whether you go, I think Watson mentioned earlier that he went input by input until he was happy. And then I guess Watson, once the recording is going, then you do listen to a final mix.
When I'm editing, when I'm in the studio, when I'm editing, but no,
So during the recording, you're flitting between one and between the
all the
different.
time,
Okay.
all the time, just because, or if it's possible, I could do two exhausts same time, or the stereo in the cab in the vehicle. But a lot of times, you see, each of the microphones. See, microphones are like ice cream flavors to me. I use that term a lot because they shine in certain moments. So I really have to listen to each one to see where they shine. One might shine this much, and the other one might shine just at that little point. So, just like that Sanken. I'm going to talk about Sanken again. Sanken CSS5. It really shines, but it gets tired. You almost need like 20 in a day just to get through the day, hopefully. So yeah, I'd like to do that one at a time to see where they go, because that's my role, is to give you each of the best sounds with all of the inputs rather than the mix. Because the mix you can do all during editing, during design work in the studio.
And do you deliver mixed files? Do you do any post on them, or do you just give them the raw files?
Depends on the job. I have jobs where they want me to do all of it, and some of them they just want just a raw, literally just a raw with the voice slate. But I still give them the spreadsheet with all the details. But I do both. It depends on the job. So some jobs, they have their own set of designers already there, and they want it their own way. Especially in games, they want to do it their own way. That way they could play with their audio engine and get it the way they want it quickly.
And on a typical video game job, Watson, do they give you guidelines, or do you guys already know each other and there's a workflow set up already and they don't have to tell you anything?
Usually it's a guideline. If it's a racing game, it's typically the same. It's going to be a lot of mics on the exhaust, a lot of mics on the engine, so that they have options to do the mix when you modify the vehicle to make it sound meaner or louder. But yeah, a lot of times it's guidelines. We want to sound this way, but not that way. So very, very detailed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What I use, I didn't chime in, is that I still prefer the 788 SSD sound device. To me, it's just a workhorse. It won't die. It works in all weather, and I've done drifting, crazy donuts in the Mercedes AMG, and it just keeps going. I've used it in a crazy desert, in a cold weather. I just love it.
Thank you. Has anything died on SWAT, Paul, in terms of recorders, mixers, lost files or cards?
I haven't lost anything yet, but all machines have a certain anomaly every now and then. They're like, oh, I don't want to work. So you just reboot it and then you can come back up. But sometimes, it is a little bit nerve-wracking if you're not sure exactly why your screen is frozen. But sound devices, at least my 688 and 788s prior to that, have been very solid and robust. And I don't really have any trouble. I haven't lost any tracks in the past because the machine malfunctioned. I haven't.
There's a question here from Steve Lagosh about a few extra mics. What is more useful, less useful? Would you capture the interior, but also the exhaust, etc.? I think, Steve, that you want to send them all of the tracks and they would mix them appropriately. Any of you guys want to comment on that?
Well, I'm not lucky, if you don't mind me stepping in. I'm not lucky enough to go into post with my stuff. We have a very full schedule throughout the year. And so I'm only there on set. And what I try to do, much like what Watson was talking about, is I try to periodically listen into each individual track, ISO each track, so I know what that microphone is doing. But then I like to blend my microphones and use the moments in throughout the scene to create that ambient soundscape that I'm looking for when I'm watching the car chase or whatever. And I've planted microphones 3-4 blocks so that we've been able to get the entire run of the shot, because we have cameras placed in all those blocks as well.
3 to 4 blocks. Wow.
It's pretty amazing how far they want to drive these vehicles.
Yeah.
But you know, as far as you can go, as many antenna relays as you can set up to help you capture that sound. But the mix is something I get to do on site. I get to, you know, I'm not lucky enough to sit in the studio, so I've got to plan my microphones. I've got to plan where the sounds are going to come from, and then I've got to flow through those moments as I'm seeing the images in front of me, if I'm lucky enough to be able to see all of the monitors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does anybody use? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gene.
Oh no, I was gonna say that's what I was just gonna. I think it's all just job dependent. You know, for Paul doing SWAT, mixing a scene for TV. It all depends on like what type of mixer or recordist we're being hired on that day. I've done stuff where obviously I'm trying to mix dialogue and sound effects all together, but it's come down to whenever I'm just doing purely sound effects, I don't think you really can do a proper mix just because you're trying to just record every aspect of a vehicle or a gun, and just you're ISOing them. You're listening to each setup and making sure it's sounding the way you want it to. But
also only in post,
non-existent for me.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting, Gene. Only in post will they have a chance to EQ each one and give it enough to give a rounded sound. It makes no sense for us to do it on set.
I'm mixing for pure pleasure. My dailies are what I like to see, and I like to feel that I'm there.
Indeed.
Do any of you guys use InstaSnake to do long runs?
I have.
I've personally run into problems just with the phantom power aspect of it. Depending on, you're supposed to use the shielded Cat 5, and that is just, for me, has been temperamental. I've used the roll-in system in the past, the little 8-channel box for that, but primarily military stuff where they're like, oh, you have to be so far back whenever we're doing anything rocket launch.
Yeah. And Paul, have you used that technology?
No, I have not.
Okay. I use that a lot for my weapons recordings. So if
the advantage,
if you want that high fidelity without using wireless, you have it. So I could run each of the shielded Cat 5e or Cat 6 gives you 4 audio signals. You could send phantom power. In theory, you could do 1,900 feet phantom power, which I'll never do. I just might as well take a recorder and drive over there and sit up there. And
if you have a link for that cable, because I've had problems with the cable, has been my biggest issue with that.
Yeah, I'll share it out. I just can't remember which one it is, but I use a lot of Cat 5e that make sure it's STP, shielded twisted pair, STP Cat 5e, and I use from the brand is called InstaSnake. I mean the model number, and it literally it's really well made. And I use the pigtails that have the XLR, so I can plug directly into my mixer recorders.
Yeah,
So
Radial makes a very similar product. They're called Ricochet, I think, or something like that.
Really?
Let me find a link. I'll post it.
I want to find a link of where. Here it is. Energy Transformation Systems makes InstaSnake that I use.
This is called Catapult. That's it, Chris. Let me post a link.
Just as a quick aside, I want to thank you guys for sharing your time and your resources with us. This is really invaluable information, and it's really cool for you to join us and share this. Thank you.
Happy to. I actually have to run very soon, but just happy to be here and talk to other professionals about what they do, cool stuff they get to do, and destroy stuff.
It's a treat to have you, Watson. I was really hoping you could make it, so thanks so much.
Thank you.
Please join us every week.
Sounds good. If I could. I actually have to run and capture more sounds for a game I'm working on. But
No worries. Thanks
thank
very
you
much.
all. Yeah, if this is being recorded, right?
It is being recorded, yeah.
I'd love to
We
hear
can
the
send you a
rest
link
of it.
we can send you a link to the Dropbox folder once it's done.
That's great. Great. Thank you. Well, thanks, guys. I got to run. I wish I could stay longer.
Thanks, Watson.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I don't know if any of you guys has any other questions for our other guests. I think we've pretty much covered everything. And of course, we don't want to overstay our guests' time. So
I just have one quick question.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, sorry, just really quick for Paul, and I can't remember who's left. What headphones are they choosing, to help decide like how cool the things they're getting from all the mics? What's been their headphone of choice?
Mine's Sennheiser HD25s.
HD25s, cool.
Yeah, I have 25s and 26s.
Right, awesome.
Yeah,
And you hit a low.
The high noise, which are just 7506s. But I found that we said if you were watching earlier, they make me sick because my head's too big, so they put too much pressure on my head.
All right,
but they're real quiet.
Green machine. I love that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Paul, is it okay for me to show a picture of the Gurkha?
I think it would be, yeah.
I just found a picture of it. Let me see if I can share the screen here. And where is it? Am I allowed to? Let's see. All I see is whiteboard. Let me see if I can open it up and share it this way. There we go. Let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
That's a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Those are the two motorcycles that are on the show, but this is the Gurkha. You guys see that?
The image I'm looking at is it looks like an A7.
Oh, there's that. That's not it. Let me see.
Good thing you didn't show the other picture.
I found are pretty more noisy than anything for car rigs.
Here we go.
That's it. That's the Gurkha in the motor pool.
Yeah. That thing is crazy. And yeah, I'm sure you love it when the all the radio mics get inside the thing and you're trying to record outside.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, is that a real vehicle that's in use right now?
Yes, it is. It's one we use almost every episode.
I'm sorry that I haven't watched the show. I promise I will now.
It's okay. We do a lot of filming inside the vehicle, against green screen, shooting from the back and the front with our team inside of it. Doing a scene, and then we also have it approach the situation, and everybody bails out of it as well. So it's standstill and driving almost every episode.
Yeah, yep. Plenty of really great vehicles on that show to record. Anyway,
Paul, question: are you also responsible, or not responsible, but do you capture because I know I love SWAT. We love SWAT. So sometimes it's like all 5 of them and they're close quarters. Do you also capture the Foley of all their footsteps just because you're there along with when they're going to do fire? And do they use that or not?
I'm compelled to record as much as I possibly can on every scene, on every take. I use a plethora of microphones that I put out to get small sounds. When I'm talking to my people about it, I say, just listen to what is around the scene as well. Primary focus is our dialogue, but there are other sounds that happen around the scene that I want to capture live, because for me, giving that live ambient to post, that sets a really realistic baseline for them to build off of. And I'm the one that watches the show, and when I hear the little tinkly glass over the car crash, I go, ah, I want that more natural sound that comes along, and therefore I'm always positioning microphones and multiple microphones all the time to get those ambience as we're rolling. And yeah, they do use them on our set.
Actually, Paul, you remind me of a comment that Sean Holden told me a couple of years ago about how we have Automix, we have Dugan, we have a lot of tools at our disposal. And she and I feel the same way. And she said, well, you know, I just like to mix because otherwise I'm going to get bored. And in a way, that's as powerful. I just wanted to have the best production mix out there. We want to keep our skills present, and it's just more fun, you know.
It is. That's my enjoyment all day long. It's like I get to do this. Yahoo! I get to mix this, and when I go back, because I watch my dailies as well, and when I go back and I look at a scene after scene after scene, I like it to sound like it's coming right out of the screen at me, just like it would if it went through post already. And when that happens, when I'm watching my dailies, I know that my post house has something to work with.
Absolutely. John McCallop, you have a question, comment?
Oh, yes. Paul, since we're talking about SWAT, this isn't a car question, but I've noticed when they're in the headquarters, those folks are wearing some pretty tight T-shirts. Are they wired? Is that something hard to deal with?
I wire everybody all the time. I feel like they've got multiple cameras. I might as well have multiple microphones. And yes, the wardrobe does create a little bit of a problem, but I look at it analytically. It's like, where can I place the microphone that it's going to be most consistent? And I try to do that when we're talking dialogue at this point, most consistent throughout each character. So I don't want one lava microphone way down low on somebody and then way up high on another person. So we have a consistent way to mic those little thin T-shirts. I'm up the back and around the collar. It's fairly standard. And if you stay right with the seam line, you can hide that microphone just right in the collar, the stretchy part of the seam, and then down the back. That doesn't necessarily say that our graphics guys aren't out there rubbing out a couple of microphones or a cable every now and then. I think that's endemic in all of filming. But I do my best to make sure my people use the proper techniques to hide those microphones as best as I can. Plus, I use a lot of cloth tape, so a lot of them, the microphones are actually on the outside of their outfits.
Thank you.
Since you mentioned the graphics guys, Paul, I'm curious whether your set is one where they're okay with painting out booms, for example. Is that something that you have encountered, or is that a no-no?
Well, we do everything we can not to be seen. Absolutely everything. If there's a little bit of a boom dip, they'll obviously paint that out. But
actually, let me interrupt you. I'm talking about the procedure in which they do the wide shots and then we dip the booms and then they use the plate to cover it. You don't do that.
Matting out.
We don't do that. We don't do that. And it starts with our directors. Once it's amazing how sensitive the directors are to seeing anything that has to do with sound. So if there's a little bit of a boom here or a shadow over there, they're almost ballistic on us. It's like, wow, look at this. So we plan. We, there's a lot of tools at our disposal, double booming, triple booming, plant mics, and I utilize all of those in a hidden fashion as best as I possibly can. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't see something in post, but we do everything we can on set to hide those things.
Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, congrats on your season 4 pickup, by the way. SWAT season 4.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Well, guys, I want to thank you all for your time. This has been quite informational. We've had a bunch of people joining us, and I want to thank, Watson left already, but Paul, Gene, thank you so much for coming along and spending some time with us. If you guys want a copy of this, you can contact me or Sabi after the fact. But anyway, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I think we're going to adjourn for now, and we're going to have our next one on Friday. You're welcome to join us. Same link, same everything. So anyway, have a wonderful day, and guys, thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you tremendously, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Be safe. Take care.
Here's Marlo.
Cheers, brother. I gotta call you anyway, so I'll send you a message or text you shortly.
Cool.
Thanks, brother. Yep, cool.
All right. Thanks. Goodbye.
See you, Paul.
Hey, Chris.
See you, Paul. Thank you.
You bet, boss. Thank you.